A woman drove a 2011 Honda Fit into my shop last spring. 163,000 miles on the clock. Original engine, original transmission. She wanted an oil change. I put it up on the lift, full look around out of habit, and found a front axle that was one hard acceleration away from snapping in two. She had no idea. She told me she'd owned that car for 9 years and never had a single problem with it. I believed her, and that's exactly what makes the Fit dangerous to buy used if you don't know where to look. Welcome back to Honda Decoded. I'm Mike. 25 years wrenching, the last 15 of which I've spent working on more Hondas than I can count. The Fit is a car I genuinely respect. It's clever, it's efficient, and the engine bottom end is practically indestructible. Every car has its failure points, and the Fit has a handful of very specific ones that show up with enough regularity that I want to walk you through them before you buy one, or before you miss something on the one you already own. Number 1. The ignition system. Coils and the loose plug problem. Let's start under the hood. The first thing I check on any used Fit is the ignition system. The 1.5-liter L15 engine that powered the first and second generation models, roughly 2007 through 2013, has two recurring ignition issues that can escalate fast if you ignore the early symptoms. First is ignition coil degradation. The factory coils on these engines tend to break down earlier than you'd expect. When a coil starts to fail, you'll notice the car stuttering under heavy acceleration, or a slight surging sensation on the highway at steady throttle. It feels like a minor annoyance, but if you keep driving on a misfiring cylinder, you'll push raw fuel into the catalytic converter. A new set of coils runs about $60 in parts. A catalytic converter replacement runs between $400 and $800, depending on whether you go OEM or aftermarket. I've seen people turn a $60 problem into a $600 problem just by ignoring it for another month. The second issue is worse, and it's specific to the 2009 through 2013 second generation cars. The factory spark plugs on these engines have a tendency to back themselves out over time. The aluminum cylinder head threads and the steel plug expand and contract at different rates through heat cycles, and over tens of thousands of miles, the plug can work its way loose. The warning sign is a ticking noise that increases in frequency with engine RPM. If you hear that, and it's coming from the top of the engine rather than the valve train, pull over and check the plug torque immediately. A plug that backs all the way out will strip the threads in the aluminum head, and at that point you're either installing a thread repair insert, a helicoil kit, about $120 in labor, or you're looking at a cylinder head replacement, which can run anywhere from $800 to $1,400, including gaskets and labor. On a car you might have bought for $6,000, that math gets uncomfortable fast. If you own a Honda or Acura and want straight talk about what actually fails, not what the forums speculate about, subscribe to Honda Decoded. New scripts drop regularly, and everyone is grounded in real shop experience. Number 2. The front axle. The rust trap nobody warns you about. This is the one that surprises people, because the Fit has a reputation for being rust-resistant and mechanically simple. And it is, mostly. But Honda made a design decision on the passenger side front axle that creates a very specific corrosion problem in high-salt environments. And it's almost impossible to see without getting underneath the car. Honda installed a rubber vibration damper midway down the front axle shaft. The idea was to reduce NVH, noise, vibration, harshness, transmitted through the drivetrain into the cabin. It works fine when it's new. The problem is that moisture and road salt get trapped under that rubber ring. And because it sits flush against the steel shaft, the steel rusts from the inside out. You can't see it just by glancing at the axle. You have to press on that rubber damper and look for swelling, or use a pick to check for flaking rust at the edges of the ring. If the axle is compromised, the shaft can shear under hard acceleration. Not gradually, not with a warning, just a snap and a dead wheel. The woman with the 163,000-mile fit I mentioned at the start, that was her problem. The axle looked fine from a distance. Up close, Aspen. With a light and a screwdriver, the rubber damper had been hiding rust for probably 2 or 3 years. A replacement axle shaft for a fit runs between $80 and $120 in parts. Labor is about an hour to an hour and a half. Total bill, roughly $200 to $250. But if you don't catch it and that axle snaps while someone's merging onto a highway, you're dealing with a tow, a potential accident, and a bill that's 3 or 4 times higher. This is the first thing I look at under any used fit. Honda Decoded covers the things that actually break, not just the things manufacturers advertise. Subscribe, and you'll have a mechanic in your corner every time you're looking at a used Honda. Number 3. The rear hatch and water intrusion. Small annoyances that become real problems. Fit. Most of the body issues on the fit are annoying rather than catastrophic, but they're worth knowing before you're standing in a parking lot in the rain with a tailgate that won't latch back. The rear hatch handle mechanism is a recurring complaint across all generations. Moisture works its way behind the exterior plastic trim panel, gets into the latch mechanism, back, and rusts out the return spring that pulls the handle back to its resting position. When that spring goes, the handle stays in the raised position and the latch won't engage. Some people just learn to live with it. Bassery. Others drive around with a bungee cord holding the tailgate down, which is not a solution. When the adhesive fails, water bypasses the barrier and drains directly onto the floor of the car. The first sign is a damp smell in the interior, followed by wet carpet in the rear footwells, and eventually mold if it's been going on long enough. I've pulled door panels on fits that have had standing water in the carpet for months before the owner noticed. Replacing the vapor barriers is a cheap repair. The materials cost maybe $20, but diagnosing it means pulling the door panels, which adds labor time. Number 4. Third generation Spexifix, 2015 through 2020. The third generation fit brought a new engine, still a 1.5 liter, but now with direct injection and a more refined interior. It also brought a couple of new failure patterns that the earlier cars didn't have. When that spring goes, the handle stays in the raised position and the latch won't engage. Some people just learn to live with it. Bassery. Others drive around with a bungee cord holding the tailgate down, which is not a solution. Fix is straightforward. A new latch mechanism and exterior handle assembly runs about $45 to $75 in parts, but it's the kind of job where you're working blind behind plastic trim panels, and it takes 2 to 3 hours if you haven't done it before. At a shop, you're looking at $150 to $200 all in. Not a disaster, but worth negotiating on if you're buying used, and the handle already has a sticky feel to it. The water intrusion issue is more important. On cars that have lived in wet climates, factory butyl rubber adhesive on the interior door vapor barriers dries out and cracks. Those vapor barriers are the plastic sheeting behind your door panels that's supposed to direct any water that gets past the window, sealed down and out through the drain holes in the door. The first is starter motor failure. On the 2015 and 2016 models with push-button start, I've seen starter motors fail before 50,000 miles with no warning. The symptom is simple. You push the button, nothing happens, or the car cranks weakly and doesn't fire. The starter itself isn't an expensive part, about $80 to $120. But the labor to replace it on the 3-generation engine is more involved than it sounds, because of how the motor is packaged in the engine bay. Budget for 2 to 3 hours of shop time. The second issue is carbon buildup on the intake valves, and this is something every 3rd-generation fit owner needs to understand. Direct injection delivers fuel directly into the cylinder, bypassing the intake valves entirely. Older port injection engines had fuel constantly washing over the back of the intake valves, which kept carbon deposits from accumulating. Direct injection removes that cleaning action, and over time, typically between 60 and 100,000 miles, carbon builds up on the back of the valves. Symptoms are rough idling, hesitation on acceleration, and a noticeable drop in fuel economy is an intake valve cleaning, which involves either walnut blasting, literally using crushed walnut shells under high pressure, or chemical cleaning with the intake manifold removed. At a shop, this job runs between $250 and $400, depending on the method. It's not a crisis repair, but it's a maintenance item that most owners aren't aware of because it never showed up on older Hondas. Third-gen Fit owner? These are the service items dealers don't put on your maintenance reminder. Subscribe to Honda Decoded so you know what's coming before your car tells you the hard way. Number 5. What the Fit gets right and how to buy one smart. I want to be clear about something. The Honda Fit is still one of the best used car purchases you can make in the under $10,000 range. L15 engine bottom end. The block, the crank, the rods is exceptionally durable. I've seen these engines run past 200,000 miles on nothing but oil changes and timing chain, service. The Fit doesn't even have a timing belt. It uses a timing chain that's designed to last the life of the engine under normal conditions. That alone sets it apart from a lot of competitors in the same price bracket. The transmission situation depends on which one you're buying. Manual transmission Fits are virtually bulletproof. The 5-speed is a Honda unit through and through, and failures are rare enough that I've almost never had one come through my shop with a gearbox problem. The automatic CVT on the newer models requires fluid changes that most owners skip. Honda says it's a sealed unit, and technically that's true, but the fluid still degrades. I recommend a drain and fill on any CVT Fit at 40,000 miles and every 30,000 miles after that. The fluid itself runs about $50. The labor is an hour. Skipping it on a high-mileage car can cost you a transmission replacement north of $4,000. If I'm buying a used Fit, here's my checklist. I'm checking the front axle damper for rust. I'm verifying the spark plug torque on second-gen cars. I'm listening for any ticking that speeds up with RPM. I'm pressing on all 4-door seals for moisture damage, and I'm asking for the maintenance record specifically around CVT fluid and ignition service. If the seller can't produce records and the car is over 80,000 miles, I'm factoring $400 to $500 of deferred maintenance into my offer. Honest disclosure. Everything I've talked about here is based on patterns I've observed over years of working on these cars in my own shop. This day, not every Fit will develop every issue, and plenty of them have sailed past 150,000 miles with nothing more than routine service. What I'm giving you is a map of where the problems tend to cluster. Not a guarantee that any specific car will fail. If you're buying a used Fit, get a pre-purchase inspection from an independent shop, ideally one with Honda experience. $40 to $60 for an inspection is the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy. And if a seller won't let you take the car to a mechanic before purchase, walk away. That's true of any used car. Not just Hondas, the Honda Fit is a genuinely good car. But like any car, it rewards the owner who pays attention and punishes the one who doesn't. Know the axle. Know the plugs. Know the CVT fluid. Stay ahead of the carbon buildup if you've got a third gen. Do those things, and a Fit will take you to 200,000 miles without argument. If you've owned a Fit and you've run into something I didn't cover, or if you want to share a mileage number and what you've had to fix along the way, drop it in the comments. I read everything. The more real-world data we put into this conversation, the more useful it is for everyone looking at one of these cars. I'm Mike. Keep the fluid clean and the plugs tight. Subscribe to Honda Decoded for mechanic-level insight on every Honda and Acura ever made. No hype, no filler, just what's actually happening inside the car.